Hey, it is Zennial Gamer, and we are here today to talk about the Water Ryu. Now, I'm going to give a disclaimer right up front. He's not necessarily the most exciting Nat 5 you've ever had, but he's really not bad. It took me a little while to kind of figure out the best way to use him. And the reason for that is because of this passive that we've got up on screen. When you first saw him, like in the patch notes, the very first thing that jumped out to you was where it said Mind's Eye passive. The damage will be offset and your attack bar will be filled up. Now, of course, in the patch notes, it didn't tell us about a cooldown time. Kind of seemed obvious there had to be a cooldown time, but we didn't know what it was. And so that was really relevant because if you just can't hit a monster and you can't ever kill it or he just keeps taking a turn, then obviously he's a little OP. So yes, as you can see, the cooldown is actually 3 turns once it's skilled up. Makes a big difference. The other thing is that multi-hitters will go right through the passive. So the first hit he takes does no damage and he gets 100% attack bar, but if he's hit multiple times, then he does take damage from the successive hits. If he's still alive at the end of those hits, then he will take a turn at that point. Now, the other thing the patch notes didn't show, which is probably the single most pleasant surprise about this guy, is the leader skill. It's a common speed skill. But the second skill it's basically an AoE strip. So it attacks all enemies 3 times. Each one has basically a 50% chance to strip a single beneficial effect. That 50% chance is once he's skilled up. So right now, mine, who is unskilled, it's a 30% chance. So the odds of me stripping AoE are kind of limited without the skill ups, but I do have a pretty good chance of stripping at least one monster as long as I have reasonable accuracy. Now, he is an attack type monster, so when we saw him come out, one of the things we were thinking is that this guy just might be like crazy OP because he's got AoE strip, you can't attack him and he doesn't take damage. As is the case with almost all of the Street Fighter monsters, his multipliers are really low. I am hopeful that Com2uS is going to wind up buffing most of these Street Fighter monsters. Obviously, a lot of people are concerned about Dark Ryu. I'm not one of them. I don't think he does anything that crazy that other monsters can't do. Maybe he does it a little bit better, but the mechanic of locking you down has always existed in the game. But that notwithstanding, most of the Street Fighter monsters are a little bit underpowered. Light Chun-Li obviously has crazy multipliers, and I believe the Fire Ryu is actually pretty good. A couple of the others are fun to play around with, and Water Ryu falls into that category. He's fun to play around with. He's probably not going to be super meta, but I think he's maybe the closest to meta of the Nat 5s that are not light or dark, other than maybe that Fire Ryu. And here's why. When we look at his overall kit, and we didn't look at his skill 1. The skill 1 is the same as all the other Ryus, which is that decreases attack power for 2 turns with a 50% chance. Once again, doesn't do crazy damage or anything. But when we look at his overall kit, he's basically a speed lead who does an AoE strip. Who does that remind you of? Chiwu, the Fire Pioneer. So when I first pulled Water Ryu, which by the way did not come from a Street Fighter scroll, when I first pulled him, I'm sitting here thinking attack type monster, I put him in a rage set, I put him in this and that, and he was very underwhelming. And then I really sat down and thought about his kit, and I was like, well, actually, this guy needs to be in one of 2 builds. He needs to be in a slower Despair build for some sort of like Despair Will turn 2 cleave, or he needs to be in a Swift set, and you need to use him for AoE strip. It's basically the same choices that you make with a Chiwu or a Triton. He does have a little bit lower base speed than Chiwu, and a lot lower base speed than Triton, obviously, but he's pretty comparable, over 100 with the common speed lead. So he's basically just a different elemental type of monster. Now, Chiwu is going to do a lot more attack bar pushback, basically, with that skill 3. The Chiwu skill 3 is, I don't want to say overpowered, but I'm going to say imbalanced, disproportionately imbalanced, because the rest of Chiwu's kit sucks. He's got this amazing skill 3, and then a relatively mediocre skill 2, and a completely random RNG, but mostly useless skill 1. So in the case of the Water Ryu, the skill 3 is the passive, and what looked to be the showcase originally, I'm going to tell you it's really not that exciting. It is kind of nice that when he gets hit, he steals a turn. It's definitely useful. It's not like crazy strong or anything. It's not the reason you use him. It's just like an also-ran. It's a little extra added benefit to the main portion of his kit, which is the ability to give a speed lead AoE strip. Now, the other thing is on his skill 2, he does have the ability to absorb attack bar. So where Chiwu can do a massive attack bar pushback, Ryu, Water Ryu, he's not going to push the attack bar back quite as much, but he's going to turn cycle himself. And when you combine that with the passive, he actually does turn cycle quite a bit. So the difference between Water Ryu and Chi-Wu effectively is turn cycling versus control, where Chi-Wu is going to push the enemy's attack bar back further. Water Ryu instead is going to turn cycle himself more. Chi-Wu has a beneficial effects block, where Water Ryu has an attack break, and then Chi-Wu has a completely random RNG 2-turn sleep that has a low activation rate. And for somebody like me who's not a fan of RNG, I prefer something a little bit more consistent. In this case, it's 75% for the attack break, which is a lot better than the 25 or 30% for the sleep. And attack break can actually be really, really useful in fights, especially depending on who you're bringing him in against. And then, of course, the fact that it's just a different attribute. So if you happen to have both, you can pick which one is appropriate. So with that outlined and the usage outlined, this is the final build set the final rune set that I wound up with him on, which is basically Swift Nemesis. Now, I didn't give him my fastest Swift set because the way I'm using him is actually he's going to be acting second behind Bastet. And what I did is I built an arena team so that we could demo kind of one possible arena cleave you could use him in. Again, very similar to the usage that you would use with Chi-Wu. Okay, so as you guys can see, we're ranked 393 right now, C3, so we probably will face some Guardian defenses. This is a reasonable test. This is not necessarily the team that I would take in against the top Guardian, G2, G3 defenses, but I think this team is reasonably effective through most of the Conqueror and maybe some Guardian 1 defenses. Okay, so for this first fight, we've got this is actually kind of a perfect test, to be honest. So we've got Samanth Tiana, and then the Rika and the Miho, obviously. So we're using the Savannah and the Pungbek here. And the basic concept, I think it's pretty straightforward. We're going to try and outspeed with the Bastet at 306. That gives me a pretty good chance to outspeed in Conqueror 3. We're going to defense break with we're going to strip obviously with the Water Ryu. We're going to defense break with the Savannah. And then the Pungbek is going to be able to do an AoE kill, including the HP splash damage that will wipe out the Miho. So this is just basically another variation of, of a Tiana cleave or of a Chi-Wu cleave. So we managed to get 2 of the strips, which is all we really need as long as we break the defense break the Tiana right here, which we did. And this is why I've got my Chi-Wu in Will Runes, and then this should pretty much just clear the team right here. Oh, and the Rika lived a little bit, so we'll go ahead and just auto out the rest and move on to the next fight. Okay, so here is another good example. This is going to be a slower kind of bruisery defense. We should be able to do enough damage to kill. But basically, if the Amduat had Will Runes, then it would get pushed back. I believe it's 45% with Chi-Wu, but since it does not have Will Runes, it would be pushed back 30%. In the case of Water Ryu, the maximum pushback is 30%. The average is going to be more like 20%. So since the Amduat is gaining 25% attack bar, it may actually wind up cutting us. Where with the Chi-Wu, it would not have cut us. In this case, it did not either, so we're good. We land the defense break on everybody, and now we're just going to hit whichever monster we think has the lowest defense, which, believe it or not, I think is going to be the Mo Long because he's going to be on an HP build. But it was not. The Mo Long actually had a respectable amount of defense, and we're probably going to lose this one. Let's go ahead and kill the Mo Long just to be safe, and then we'll go ahead and just auto out from here. Okay, so here's another example of just kind of the bruiser meta, but in this case, there is one big difference, which is we've got a Triana on this team. So in this case, the Pungbek is actually not the best choice for a nuke. If I had another monster speed tune for this team, I'd probably switch it out. But the concern here is if we do not defense break the Triana, and they are normally built on resistance, we still have to either target the Triana or use our Pungbek skill 2 and wait one more rotation. Now, this time we actually did defense break the Triana, so we can go ahead and just hit her. This should kill the Triana, and then we're fine. But if we had targeted another monster, which I did in a previous recording, then we would have done 0 damage, and we would have done 0 damage to everybody. So in this case now, we can pretty much just auto out and move on to the next fight. Okay, so for this next fight, or for this first Guild War fight, we've got this Ophelia, Odin, and Vigor. I'm going to admit, I'm not super confident on this, but we are in G3. There weren't a whole lot of defenses that would work for the specific monsters that I have runed and speed tuned right now. Not to say that you couldn't use the Water Ryu against some of these defenses, I just don't have teams properly speed-tuned, so we are going to try against one of the teams that looks like it might be slower, although I have a feeling that's going to be a Swift Vigor. Okay, so we did outspeed the Vigor, which I wasn't highly confident about. Now, if you look at the attack bars, this is where it gets interesting. Basically, the Vigor's at full attack bar, so are the Pungbek, the Galleon, and the Water Ryu, but I will tell you there's about a 20-25 speed gap between the Water Ryu and the Galleon, so we are going to need him to absorb at least one time out of the 3 on this Vigor in order for us to get a turn. As long as he absorbs one time, the Galleon and the Pungbek are pretty well speed-tuned, and it looks like he did not absorb any, so let's see if the Vigor does get up his crit resist. We're probably in a lot of trouble. So we did land the defense break. He did get the crit resist up. So there you go. If the Water Ryu was skilled up, I might have actually managed to get that one extra attack bar absorb I needed. But now we've got a 50-50 chance to get through this crit resist. So let's see what happens. We did get the crit. We did not do enough damage. Whoa. Okay, we got the crit on the Vigor, but not on the Odin. So here's the beauty of it. The Water Ryu actually took no damage, got the Odin to dump his stacks. Unfortunately, the Odin procced and stole 2 stacks, and there goes my Galleon. 1 shot. That's brutal. So I think we're still dead here, yeah. There's nothing we can do. Okay, goodbye. Wow, go Odin, go. All right, can we get a sleep? No? Okay, goodbye, Pungbek. I guess that is going to wrap up our demo of the Water Ryu in this Guild War. So on that note, and in summary, here's what I would say. Water Ryu is probably not going to be game-changing for you unless he happens to be your first AoE stripper. However, he is a really fun toy. He does work very nicely in certain types of cleave comps, especially if you don't have Chiwu. He is basically a water Chiwu, slightly different kits, but they serve the exact same role and function. I do think we'll see him a little bit in RTA next season. Basically, again, filling that role of Chiwu, but maybe working to provide people with a little bit more of an attribute opportunity. So for example, if somebody picks a Chiwu, I may bring in a lot of different water monsters so that the Chiwu's got a better chance to glance. And a lot of times that counter is set up because the Chiwu is picked early. And sometimes the Chiwu is picked early simply because people are racing to pick it. So if you happen to have both of them, it gives you the ability to wait a little bit longer and then pick whichever one is going to be more appropriate for that fight. For example, Chiwu or Water Ryu. So he provides a little bit more flexibility for certain types of cleaves. And then again, in Arena, he's also going to give you the opportunity to build some kind of unique cleaves. Another one that I didn't demonstrate because he's not runed, but Sige, this month's Hall of Heroes monster, would work really, really well in place of the Pungbek that I used in Arena earlier. Basically, anything that's going to give you really large AoE damage is going to work nicely in place of that Pungbek. And I can't build it because I don't have Light Chun-Li, but the one where I think he's just going to be absolutely amazing is going to be the Water Ryu, the Light Chun-Li, the Fire Chun-Li, and the Galleon, if you're able to speed tune it properly. Which the Galleon doesn't have to have crazy stats, and you know the Ryu and the Fire Chun-Li are both just going to be in Swift sets, so it's really just if you can build a strong Light Chun-Li, I think that's going to be a crazy strong Arena offensive cleave. So I think overall, in the spirit of tier list, I would probably put Water Ryu in the A tier. He falls right in there. Definitely a usable monster, definitely a fun monster, not necessarily game-changing, but certainly a monster that's worth building. So the last thing that I want to mention about Water Ryu, because I've compared him to Chiwu constantly throughout this video, but I think there is one thing that is really important to recognize, which is that Chiwu does not specifically need to be max skilled, because the skill 3, which is really disproportionately powerful for Chiwu, it doesn't gain any kind of activation rate or harmful effect rate. The cool time really is nice, but ultimately, if you are still on the field after 4 turns when you're running a cleave, the odds are that you've lost anyway. Conversely, the Water Ryu genuinely does need to be Devilmond because of that harmful effect rate in his skill 2. Best case scenario, if you get really lucky, it could only take 3 devils, although you might want to try and make sure you hit the Mind's Eye passive as well. So you're probably going to be investing at least 4 devils into the Water Ryu, where you can get away with using Chiwu without devils. Now, if you're bringing either of these monsters into RTA, they probably should be fully skilled, because every little bit of damage can make the difference between a win or a loss. But when we're talking about just using them in, and when we're talking about using them in Arena, it doesn't matter so much if you take a loss here or there, unless you're like making a push for a new rank during Rush Hour. But when you're talking about guild content, I do think that the skill ups on Water Ryu are going to be pretty important. So on that note, guys, hope you enjoyed the video. As always, I appreciate you watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey guys, if you're still with me to this point, then that means that you probably liked the video, found it entertaining, or even better, both. So please smash the like button, hit the subscribe button, and leave a comment down below, because those things help the channel grow, and more importantly, they show me that the video is useful, and that's the whole reason I do this in the first place.